Before we blast off, say hi in the comments. It may seem small, but it helps the algorithm beam this out to more sci-fi fans, and I seriously love seeing who's part of the crew. The Vorlaxians had conquered precisely 3,497 planets before arriving at Earth, a statistic they were insufferably proud of and mentioned at every possible opportunity. This was, coincidentally, the exact number of times Private Jack Thompson had rolled his eyes since being drafted into humanity's last defensive line, a ragtag battalion stationed just outside Duluth, Minnesota, which was, for reasons that would baffle xenobiologists for centuries to come, the exact spot where the alien mothership had decided to park. The thing about the Vorlaxians was that they were, in every measurable way, superior to humans. Their technology made Earth's most advanced weaponry look like children's toys. Their ships, massive chrome-plated hexagonal structures that defied several laws of physics, and one local parking ordinance, hovered over the planet's major cities with the casual menace of a debt collector who knows exactly where you live. Earth's governments had attempted diplomacy, which failed spectacularly when the Vorlaxian ambassador mistook the UN Secretary-General's extended hand for an offer of his arm as a snack. They had tried military might, which resulted in the humiliating discovery that the aliens could simply reprogram missiles mid-flight and send them back with apologetic notes attached. They had even tried surrendering, but the paperwork involved was so extensive that the aliens got bored waiting and resumed their invasion anyway. And so it came down to this. Private Thompson, crouched behind what remained of a Walmart supercenter, clutching his standard-issue rifle that, according to the brochure, was effective against most terrestrial threats, and some aquatic ones if you hit them really hard. It was not, however, rated for extraterrestrial combat, a fact that the marketing department had not anticipated needing to specify. "We're completely doomed," muttered Sergeant Bill Williams, a man whose name suggested his parents had run out of creativity shortly after his conception. "Those alien bastards have already taken out our Air Force, Navy, and most of our Starbucks location." "At least they left the independent coffee shops," Thompson offered, attempting to find the silver lining in humanity's imminent extinction. "That's because they're using them as command centers," Williams growled. "Turns out the Vorlaxians are extremely fond of free Wi-Fi and overpriced pastries." The aliens themselves were a peculiar sight. Standing roughly 7 feet tall, they resembled what might happen if someone described a human to an octopus who then tried to build one from memory using only pipe cleaners and ball bearings. Their skin was a pale lavender color that seemed to shimmer slightly, as though they were perpetually covered in the kind of glitter that never quite washes off. Each had exactly 7 eyes arranged in a mathematically perfect pattern that scientists suspected was some kind of status symbol, like a cosmic LinkedIn profile. Most disconcerting of all was their method of communication, a series of perfectly modulated tones that somehow conveyed not just meaning but also a vague sense that they were judging your choice of footwear. The Vorlaxian advance squad had been methodically working its way through the ruined shopping center for the past hour, scanning each destroyed store with devices that looked suspiciously like souped-up barcode readers. They moved with perfect synchronization, their movements so precise they might have been computer animated. "What's the plan, Sarge?" Thompson whispered, his voice cracking slightly. Williams gave him a look that managed to convey both deep disappointment and grudging acceptance. "Plan? The plan is we make our last stand here, behind the ruins of the Discount Tire Center, and hopefully buy enough time for some of the civilians to escape, though where they're escaping to I couldn't tell you. Maybe Canada." The aliens seemed confused by the metric system. A crackling voice came over their radio. "All units, fall back to position Delta." "I repeat, fall back to..." The transmission ended in a burst of static that neither man found particularly reassuring. "Well, that's that," Williams sighed, checking the ammunition in his rifle. "Position Delta is 2 miles north of here. No way we make it past those walking calamari platters." Thompson peered over their cover. The Vorlaxians were now just 50 yards away, moving with that unsettling precision. One of them was holding what appeared to be a clipboard, making notes with a tentacle that shouldn't have been able to hold a pen but somehow managed anyway. "I always thought the end would involve more explosions," Thompson said, a strange calm settling over him. "You know, like in the movies." Not an alien with a clipboard," Williams snorted. "Yeah, turns out the apocalypse has a lot more paperwork than we expected." He pulled a battered silver flask from his pocket and took a swig before offering it to Thompson. "Here, If we're going out, might as well go out with a buzz. The liquid burned, Thompson's throat going down, and tasted vaguely of engine degreaser and regret, a homemade concoction Williams had dubbed Sergeant's Revenge. It was precisely at this moment that Thompson's brain, perhaps in self-defense against the assault on his taste buds, decided to recall a joke his grandfather had told him years ago. "Hey, Sarge," he said, the alcohol warming him from inside. "What do you call an alien with 3 eyes who can't find his way home?" Williams stared at him blankly. Is this really the time for a lost cause? Thompson delivered the punchline, and then, despite everything, despite the aliens, despite the impending doom, despite the fact that the joke wasn't even particularly funny, he started to laugh. It wasn't a dignified laugh. It was the kind of laugh that begins in your stomach and bursts out of you like an escaping prisoner, the kind that makes your eyes water and your nose run and your whole body shake. It was the laugh of someone who had accepted that the universe was fundamentally absurd and decided to embrace it. Williams looked at him like he'd gone completely mad, which, to be fair, wasn't an unreasonable assessment. But then something strange happened. The nearest Vorlaxian stopped moving. Its clipboard clattered to the ground. Its 7 eyes all blinked at slightly different intervals, creating a ripple effect across its face. It raised one tentacle to its head in a gesture that looked disturbingly human. Thompson couldn't stop laughing. The situation, the aliens with clipboards, the end of the world happening in a Walmart parking lot, the fact that humanity's last defense was 2 soldiers sharing a flask of questionable alcohol, it was all too ridiculous. And then the Vorlaxian made a sound. It was high-pitched and strained, like a dial-up modem trying to connect to the internet while underwater. Its body began to twitch, its movements no longer precise but jerky and uncoordinated. "What's happening to it?" Williams whispered, his hand tightening on his rifle. Thompson, still giggling uncontrollably, could only shake his head. The other Vorlaxians had noticed their comrade's distress and were moving toward it, their perfect formation breaking down as they rushed to its aid. And then a second alien began making the same strange noise. Then a third. Within moments, the entire advance squad was twitching and emitting that peculiar high-pitched sound, their tentacles flailing wildly. "I think," Thompson managed between gasps of laughter, "I think they're short-circuiting." Williams stared in disbelief as the aliens that had conquered thousands of worlds, that had rendered Earth's most advanced weapons useless, that had brought humanity to the brink of extinction, began collapsing one by one, their bodies convulsing in what looked uncomfortably like seizures. "It's the laughter," Thompson realized suddenly, the absurdity of it making him laugh even harder. "They can't handle laughter. It's disrupting something in them." As if to confirm his theory, the nearest Vorlaxian fixed all 7 of its eyes on him, its gaze filled with what could only be described as horror. It emitted one final, strangled sound before collapsing in a heap of twitching tentacles. Williams looked from the fallen aliens to Thompson and back again. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. "You're telling me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "that the most advanced species in the galaxy has a fatal weakness to dad jokes?" Thompson wiped tears from his eyes, his sides aching from laughter. "Apparently so." The sergeant's expression shifted from disbelief to something like wonder. Then he started to laugh too, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to come from his very core. In the distance they could hear the Vorlaxian mothership emitting a series of alarm tones. Emergency lights began flashing across its surface. "We need to tell everyone," Williams said, already reaching for his radio. "Get every comedian, every class clown, every person who's ever made someone spit out their drink laughing. Humanity might just have a chance after all." As Thompson watched the panicking aliens, a thought occurred to him. If laughter was their weakness, what else might affect them? What other uniquely human traits might prove to be unexpected weapons? For the first time since the invasion began, he felt something that had become almost foreign to him. Hope. Perhaps humanity's chaotic, messy, emotional nature wasn't a disadvantage after all. Perhaps it was our greatest strength. He picked up his rifle, no longer feeling the weight of certain doom. "Come on, Sarge," he said, grinning. "Let's go tell the world the punchline." Word of humanity's accidental discovery spread faster than a celebrity scandal on social media. Within 48 hours of Private Thompson's inadvertent breakthrough, The highest-ranking military officials, still capable of operating a Zoom call, had assembled what they grandly called Operation Punchline. This was, by all reasonable standards, the most ridiculous defense strategy in the history of warfare. "Let me get this straight," said General Frank Morrison, a man whose face had spent so many years arranged in a scowl that it had forgotten how to do anything else. "Our plan to save the planet is comedy." On the screen before him was an unlikely war council. 3 stand-up comedians, a circus clown, a late-night talk show host, 2 professional satirists, and a teenager who had gone viral for a series of elaborate practical jokes involving garden gnomes and public transportation. "Not just any comedy, sir," replied Dr. Eleanor Watson, the quantum physicist who'd been hastily reassigned from nuclear defense to what was now being called hilarity dynamics. "Our analysis of the Duluth incident suggests that the Vorlaxians' neural networks operate on quantum frequencies that somehow become disrupted when exposed to the specific brainwave patterns humans produce during genuine laughter." "In English, Doctor," the general growled. "They short-circuit when we laugh at them," she clarified. "And not just any laughter, it has to be authentic. The more absurd and unexpected the humor, the more devastating the effect." The general rubbed his temples. "So we're assembling an army of, what? Class clowns?" "We prefer hilarity tactical response units," said Watson, with the straight face of someone who'd clearly been practicing that line, and thus began the most unusual military mobilization in Earth's history. Comedy clubs were declared essential military installations. Stand-up comedians were given officer ranks based on their average audience ratings. The writer's room of Saturday Night Live was moved to a bunker beneath the Pentagon. Improv troops were airdropped behind enemy lines, armed with nothing but their wits and a few rubber chickens for emergency situations. In New Orleans, Darren the Destroyer Jackson found himself promoted from open mic regular at the Chuckle Hut to captain of the 3rd Comedian Battalion. His squad consisted of 5 other comics, each with their own comedic specialty: Melissa Parr, whose deadpan delivery could silence a rowdy room; Tony Gonzalez, master of physical comedy; Stephanie Warner, whose observational humor cut like a surgeon's scalpel; Mike Benson, whose dad jokes were so bad they circled back to brilliant; and Dave Phillips, whose improvisational skills had once talked him out of a parking ticket and into a dinner date with the officer who'd pulled him over. "I still don't understand why I'm here," Phillips said, as they huddled in the ruins of what had once been a luxury hotel. "My last show got 2 stars on Yelp, and one of those was from my mother." "Because," Jackson explained, checking the specialized equipment they'd been issued, essentially boom boxes designed to amplify their voices. "According to the eggheads, it's not about being professional-grade funny. It's about creating that specific neural response. Your brain does something weird when you make people laugh, and that weirdness is apparently alien kryptonite." A lieutenant appeared, looking harried. "The Vorlaxians have taken control of the business district. They're converting the stock exchange into what we think is some kind of probability engine. You need to move now." Jackson nodded grimly. "All right, people, check your material. Remember, we need genuine laughs. No fake stuff, no polite chuckles. If it wouldn't kill at a late-night set, it won't kill aliens." "No pressure," muttered Phillips. As they moved through the abandoned streets, the evidence of alien occupation was everywhere. The Vorlaxians had rearranged entire city blocks into geometrically perfect patterns. Street signs had been replaced with incomprehensible symbols that somehow managed to be both beautiful and vaguely threatening. Floating orbs patrolled regularly, scanning for human life with beams of purple light. "I feel like I'm in one of those avant-garde art installations that everyone pretends to understand," whispered Warner. "Yeah," Park replied, "except this one comes with its own genocide." They froze as one of the orbs approached, its scanning beams sweeping dangerously close. When it passed, they continued toward their target, a plaza where the aliens had established what intelligence called a synchronization node, whatever that meant. From their vantage point behind an overturned food truck, they could see approximately 20 Vorlaxians arranged in a perfect circle. In the center floated a device that looked like a disco ball, designed by someone who had only had disco balls described to them by a particularly unimaginative accountant. "That's the target," Jackson whispered. "If we can disrupt that node, it'll knock out their communication across 3 sectors." "How exactly are we supposed to make them laugh?" Benson asked. "It's not like we can just walk up and start our routines." Jackson pulled out what looked like a small silver sphere, remote amplification device. We turn it on, start our sets, and it'll project our voices right into the plaza. And then we just hope they find us funny. Phillips looked skeptical. No, Jackson corrected. We hope we find us funny. According to the lab coats, it's our laughter that triggers the response. We need to crack each other up first, then it cascades. So we're our own first audience, Gonzalez nodded. I can work with that. Jackson activated the device. Showtime, people. The amplifier hummed to life, creating a sphere of silence around them that would allow them to hear each other while projecting their voices into the plaza. Ladies and gentlemen, Jackson began, his voice booming across the empty space. Welcome to the Apocalypse Comedy Hour, where the stakes are extinction and the hecklers have tentacles. In the plaza, the Vorlaxians froze, their 7 eyes swiveling in perfect unison toward the source of the voice. You know, I tried to prepare for this invasion, Jackson continued, hitting his stride. I stocked up on canned goods, batteries, the works, but nowhere on the emergency preparedness checklist did it mention purple octopus people with a clipboard fetish. Warner snorted despite herself. One of the aliens twitched. I mean, they traveled across the galaxy to get here, Jackson went on. You'd think they'd at least bring some decent tourist outfits. But no, they show up looking like someone spilled grape juice on a pile of pipe cleaners. Phillips was fighting back laughter now. In the plaza, 3 of the Vorlaxians had begun making that strange high-pitched sound. Emboldened, Gonzalez jumped in. You want to know the real reason they invaded? Earth is the galaxy's Florida. All the weird stuff happens here, and they just wanted front-row seats. That broke the dam. The comedians dissolved into genuine laughter, each feeding off the other's reactions. As they laughed, the effect on the aliens was immediate and dramatic. The perfect circle collapsed as Vorlaxians clutched at their heads, their movements becoming erratic. The disco ball, Jackson shouted between gasps of laughter. Keep going! Parks stepped up, her usual deadpan giving way to real amusement. I heard the alien leader tried Earth food and was so confused by Pringles that they devoted an entire research division to figuring out why once you pop, you can't stop. The synchronization node began to spark and wobble in the air as the Vorlaxians around it convulsed. The comedians were practically in hysterics now. Years of training in making others laugh now turned on themselves in a feedback loop of genuine hilarity. Their ships, Benson wheezed. Their ships looked like someone told a 5-year-old to draw a UFO while riding a roller coaster. With a sound like 1,000 modem connections failing simultaneously, the node exploded in a shower of light. The Vorlaxians collapsed, their neural networks overloaded by the incomprehensible assault of human absurdity. As reports flooded in from around the world, it became clear that Operation Punchline was working. In Tokyo, a team of game show hosts had reclaimed the financial district. In London, a squadron of Monty Python enthusiasts had driven aliens from Buckingham Palace. In Rio, carnival performers had turned the tide with nothing but elaborate costumes and the ability to find joy in the face of apocalypse. At the Pentagon, General Morrison stared at the tactical map in disbelief as more and more red zones turned green. I don't understand, he muttered. They conquered thousands of worlds. How could they have this weakness? Dr. Watson studied the latest data from the field. We think it's because their entire civilization is built on logic and predictability. They evolved in a binary star system where environmental conditions never varied. Their neural networks developed to process information in perfect orderly patterns. And laughter is chaos, pure neurological chaos. When we laugh genuinely, our brains fire in patterns that are completely unpredictable. It's one of the few truly random processes in human cognition. To a species that evolved in perfect order, it's like throwing a wrench into a precision watch. On the main view screen, footage showed a Vorlaxian command ship, listing sideways over Seattle, its systems failing as a local improv troupe performed below. They're retreating, someone announced. Worldwide, they're actually falling back. But victory brought new questions. As the alien mothership prepared to depart Earth's atmosphere, it broadcast a message, not in its usual perfect tones, but in slightly stilted English. Humans, you have demonstrated a power we cannot comprehend. Your minds contain chaos that destroys order. We will return when we understand. We will study this, laugh. In New Orleans, Jackson's team watched the ship disappear into the clouds. Did we just win a war with dad jokes? Phillips asked incredulously. More importantly, Warner added, Did we just teach an advanced alien civilization to develop a sense of humor? Jackson looked at the sky where the ship had vanished. I'm not sure if we've saved the world or doomed the galaxy to an eternity of alien knock-knock jokes. As humanity began rebuilding, a new branch of the military was formally established, the Comedic Defense Force. Training facilities were constructed where recruits learned not just combat tactics, but timing, delivery, and the art of the callback. Reality show contestants were drafted based on their unintentional humor ratings. Children who had once been sent to the principal's office for disrupting class were now identified early as having strategic hilarity potential. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, the Vorlaxian fleet retreated to regroup and reconsider. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something their advanced intelligence couldn't process, the beautiful, chaotic absurdity of human laughter. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. 3 months after the Vorlaxian retreat, Earth had settled into what politicians optimistically called a new normal, which meant that people had gone back to complaining about traffic and posting pictures of their lunch online, only now they did it while glancing nervously at the sky. Military leaders warned that the alien message about returning when we understand should be taken literally and seriously. Consequently, the Comedic Defense Force continued to expand, with humor bunkers constructed in major cities and mandatory joke drills conducted in schools alongside fire and earthquake preparations. What no one expected was for the Vorlaxians to return quite so discreetly. Supreme Commander Zeeks-9, highest authority of the Vorlaxian Collective and veteran of 2,938 planetary acquisitions, did not arrive with the expected fanfare of an armada. There was no mothership casting dramatic shadows over cities, no ominous broadcast interrupting television shows, though in the case of certain reality programs, many would have welcomed the break. Instead, he arrived in a vessel roughly the size of a minivan, which he promptly crashed into a cornfield in Iowa because, as it turned out, parallel parking was a universal challenge. Farmer Neil Jenkins discovered the wreckage while investigating what he assumed was damage from local teenagers who periodically used his property for what they called corn parties, and what he called criminal trespassing. What he found instead was a slightly dazed Vorlaxian attempting to blend in by wearing what appeared to be 3 trench coats stacked on top of each other and a fedora perched precariously atop its uppermost eye. "Well, I'll be damned," said Jenkins, with the remarkable calm of someone who had lived through too many strange events to be surprised by one more. "You're one of them alien fellas." "I am human person," announced Zeeks-9 in a voice that suggested he had learned English from an instruction manual written by someone who had only a theoretical understanding of volume control. "I enjoy human activities such as consuming nutrients and complaining about weather." Jenkins stared at him for a long moment. "Uh-huh. And I'm the Queen of England." "Your Majesty," Zeeks-9 replied, with a small bow that dislodged his fedora. Despite what multiple action movies had suggested would be the proper response to finding an alien in one's cornfield, namely panic, call the authorities or attempt amateur dissection, Jenkins instead invited Zeeks-9 into his house for coffee. This decision would later be credited with either saving humanity or dooming it, depending on who you asked and how many conspiracy theory podcasts they subscribed to. What Jenkins didn't know was that Supreme Commander Zeeks-9 had come to Earth on a mission of utmost importance to understand the mysterious power of laughter that had defeated an undefeatable armada. He had volunteered for this dangerous infiltration because, after reviewing the data from the failed invasion, he had experienced something unprecedented in his 900-year existence: curiosity. The Vorlaxian Collective had conquered planets through perfect efficiency and logical superiority. They had never been defeated, and certainly never by something as inexplicable as spontaneous neural disruptions caused by vibrations from human vocal cords. As Jenkins puttered around his ancient coffee maker, Zeeks-9 surreptitiously scanned the human's neural patterns with a device disguised as a pocket watch. The readings were fascinating, chaotic, unpredictable, and yet somehow harmonious, like music composed by a mathematician having a nervous breakdown. "So," Jenkins said, placing a mug in front of his visitor, "you planning on invading again, or is this more of a tourist thing?" Zeeks-9 blinked all 7 eyes in succession, unsure how to respond to such directness. The invasion protocols didn't cover small talk with potential conquests. "I am conducting research," he admitted finally. "On what? How to destroy us better next time?" "On laughter. It is unknown to us." Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "Unknown? You mean you folks never laugh? Correct. This concept does not exist in Voraxian experience. Jenkins took a thoughtful sip of his coffee. Well, that explains a lot. Must be a pretty miserable existence. Miserable. Zix9 tilted his head, the universal gesture of confusion. We are the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. We have eliminated inefficiency, irrationality, and unpredictability from our existence. And joy, apparently, Jenkins muttered. Then, louder. So what happens when you hear us laugh? Some kind of allergic reaction? Zix9 hesitated. The truth was more complex and more troubling than the Vorlaxian leadership had admitted. The sound creates disruptions. Neural pathways activate that have been dormant for millions of years. Dormant? You mean you used to be able to laugh? Perhaps. Our evolutionary history indicates that early Voraxians experienced greater neural variability. This was deemed inefficient and bred out. Jenkins stared at him. You bred laughter out of your species? On purpose? Not specifically laughter. All unpredictable emotional response. Well, that's the most depressing thing I've heard all week, and I watch the news every night. Meanwhile, across the country, the unlikely heroes of the New Orleans Comedy Squad had been promoted to the elite Strategic Humor Task Force, a unit so secret that even its acronym was classified. They now operated out of an underground bunker beneath what had once been a particularly unsuccessful comedy club in Nevada. We've got something, announced Melissa Park, studying a monitor. Energy signature matching Vorlaxian technology, but tiny, like one-person transport tiny. Darren Jackson frowned. Location? Middle of nowhere, Iowa. Reconnaissance. Advanced scout? Or their version of a peace envoy, suggested Dave Phillips. Maybe they want to talk. More likely they're studying us, said Stephanie Warner. Trying to figure out our weakness. You mean our strength? Tony Gonzalez corrected. Whatever it is, we need to check it out, Jackson decided. Gear up, people. We're going to Iowa. Back at the farmhouse, Jenkins had decided that the best way to explain humor to an alien was through practical demonstration. He was currently showing Zycad 9 compilation videos on his tablet, a collection labeled America's Funniest Home Videos, Trampoline Fail. See, it's funny because they think they're going to do something impressive, but instead they bounce off and hit the tree, Jenkins explained. Zix9 studied the video with scientific detachment. The humor derives from subverted expectations and minor misfortune. I guess so. Plus it's just plain silly to watch someone bounce into a tree. Here, try another one. The next video showed a cat misjudging a jump and face-planting into a wall. Zix9 tilted his head again. Process. The feline miscalculated. This is amusing. It's not just that it miscalculated, Jenkins tried to explain. It's that cats are supposed to be graceful, and this one, look, it thought it was so cool, and then Jenkins started chuckling despite himself. And its face afterward, like it's pretending it meant to do that. As Jenkins laughed, Zix9 felt a strange sensation in his neural network, not the disruptive short circuit that had affected the invasion force, but something different. A tingling in what humans might call his brainstem, a flutter of activity in dormant neural clusters. I am experiencing unusual sensations, he announced. That's called getting the joke, Jenkins said, or at least the start of it. It was at this moment that the front door burst open, and 5 people in tactical gear emblazoned with the letters SHTF rushed in, led by Darren Jackson. Step away from the alien, Jackson commanded, pointing what looked like a modified karaoke machine at Zix9. Now hold on just a minute, Jenkins objected, stepping between them. We're in the middle of something important here. Sir, you don't understand. That's not just any Vorlaxian, according to our scanners. That's their supreme commander. Zix9 stood up, shedding his ineffective disguise.
Correct.
I am supreme commander. Zix9 of the Voraxian Collective. See? He admits it. Jackson kept his weapon trained on the alien. Sir, please move aside. And do what? Jenkins demanded. Kill him. He's here to learn about laughter. Says they never had it. The comedy squad exchanged confused glances. What do you mean, never had it? Asked Warner. Laughter was bred out of our species, Zix9 explained, along with all unpredictable emotional response. We believe this made us superior. But when you hear us laugh, Phillips began, it activates dormant neural pathways, What you witnessed in your invasion defense was not destruction but awakening. The room fell silent as the implications sank in.
You mean we weren't killing them?
Jackson asked slowly.
We were.
What? Tickling them back to life? Essentially correct, though imprecisely stated. Your laughter triggered neural renaissance. Jenkins looked triumphant. See? I told you it was important. We were just watching cat videos. C9 turned to the monitor where the cat video was paused. I believe I am beginning to comprehend. The incongruity between expectation and reality creates a neural response that is pleasant. That's one theory of humor, Warner said cautiously, lowering her weapon. Over the next several hours, in what would later be recorded in history books as the Iowa Humor Summit, the Comedy Squad and Jenkins introduced the Supreme Commander to a crash course in human comedy, puns, slapstick, satire, knock-knock joke, and even a carefully curated selection of memes that Phillips insisted were critical to understanding contemporary humor. Zix-9 absorbed it all with increasing neural activity, his 7 eyes occasionally twitching in what might have been the Vorlaxian equivalent of a smile. I believe, he said, his voice noticeably less robotic now, that I am experiencing the preliminary stages of humor appreciation. That's good, Jackson encouraged. Now try to laugh. Just let it happen naturally. I am uncertain of the mechanism, Zix-9 admitted. Don't think about it, Jenkins suggested. That's the whole point. Laughter isn't logical. As they continued their impromptu comedy lesson, something remarkable happened. While watching a particularly absurd sketch involving a man tenting to mail himself in a box, Zix-9's neural patterns shifted dramatically. A sound emerged from him, hesitant at first, then stronger, that resembled nothing so much as the rusty hinges of a door that hadn't been opened in centuries. He was laughing. The sound triggered something in his communication implant, sending an automatic signal to the Vorlaxian fleet waiting at the edge of the solar system. Within moments, the entirety of Vorlaxian High Command was receiving neural readings that, according to their ancient records, had not been seen in their species for millions of years. I understand now, Zix-9 said, his voice fluctuating with new emotional resonance. We did not lose the battle for Earth. We gained something we did not know was missing. 3 weeks later, representatives from Earth's governments gathered at the United Nations to meet with the Vorlaxian leadership, not as conquered subjects, but as teachers. The aliens had returned, not to invade, but to learn. For millions of years, Zix-9 addressed the assembly, we believed that perfect order was the pinnacle of evolution. We eliminated chaos, unpredictability, and with them joy. We conquered thousands of worlds, seeking something we could not name, never realizing what we had lost. He gestured to the comedy squad, who sat in a place of honor. These humans showed us what we had forgotten, that sometimes chaos is necessary, that unpredictability creates possibility, that laughter is not weakness, it is strength. The Vorlaxian collective formally proposed an alliance with Earth, not based on military power or technological exchange, but on cultural rehabilitation. Earth would help reintroduce humor, creativity, and emotional intelligence to a species that had engineered these traits out of themselves in pursuit of perfect efficiency. In return, the Vorlaxians would share their advanced technology, but with a warning. Do not follow our path. Do not sacrifice your chaos for order. Universities worldwide established departments of xenohumor. Comedians became cultural ambassadors to the stars. A special division of translators worked to adapt human jokes into forms comprehensible to alien neural structures. 1 year after the invasion that wasn't, Private Jack Thompson, now Colonel Thompson of the Interspecies Humor Exchange, stood beside Zix-9 on the observation deck of a Vorlaxian vessel orbiting Earth. Did you hear the one about the alien who walked into a bar? Thompson asked. Zix-9 made the chirping sound that humans had learned was Vorlaxian laughter. Please, not that one again. My neural pathways are still recovering from the last time. Thompson smiled. You know, when I joined the military, I never imagined my greatest contribution would be teaching aliens to appreciate knock-knock jokes. And when I became Supreme Commander, I never imagined that the conquest of Earth would result in the liberation of my own species. Zix-9's voice had developed nuance over the months, inflection, timing, even the beginnings of irony. Below them, the blue planet turned oblivious to how close it had come to devastation and how unexpectedly it had found its place in the galaxy, not through force or technology, but through the simple, profound capacity for joy. There is an old Vorlaxian saying, Zix 9, said, one we had forgotten until now. The universe expands not through order, but through surprise. Thompson nodded. I like that. I think humanity is just beginning to understand it too. As their ship moved toward the newly established interspecies cultural exchange station, Thompson couldn't help but imagine future history books describing how humanity saved itself with punchlines and became the teachers of the galaxy, not through strength of arms, but strength of spirit. How a weapon that wasn't a weapon had created an alliance that was reshaping civilization across the stars. All because someone had told a bad joke at the end of the world and, against all odds, laughed